Hi, everyone. On behalf of Ardent Partners and GEP, I'd like to welcome you to the webinar, CPO Rising 2018, The Age of Intelligence, sponsored by GEP. My name is Matt York, Senior Research Analyst here at Ardent Partners, and I'll be serving as a moderator for today's presentation. Now, let's meet today's speakers. Mudit Kumar is a leader in the procurement and supply chain domain, recognized for his significant impact in creating value and efficiency across many Fortune 500 companies. For more than 15 years, Mudit has led major initiatives spanning billions of dollars in scope and created hundreds of millions of dollars in value across the US, Europe, and Latin America. He has leveraged leading-edge paradigms and emerging technologies to drive transformation across the source-to-pay spectrum in procurement. He partners closely with senior executives to deliver bottom-line cost reductions and to drive short and long-term strategic goals. Mudit has worked across many industry verticals, but has a specific focus on the CPG industry sector. Prior to joining GEP, Mudit was working as a leading advisor to various marquee clients with Ernst & Young. Mudit has an MBA from NC State University and a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from Delhi College of Engineering. Hello and welcome, Mudit.
Thanks, Matt.
Andrew Bartolini is Ardent's founder and chief research officer and a globally recognized expert in supply management and procurement. Andrew brings 20 years of direct procurement experience to bear in his research, having developed, packaged, deployed, and used supply management solutions on behalf of enterprises in the Global 2000 while working for the Ariba and Commerce One network. Over the past decade, Andrew has benchmarked thousands of enterprises across all facets of their accounts payable, sourcing, procurement, and supply management operations, and his research is currently part of the supply chain management curriculum at several U.S. universities. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, Matt. Hello, everybody.
Now, let me tell you about our sponsor. GEP helps global enterprises operate more efficiently and effectively, gain competitive advantage, boost profitability, and maximize business and shareholder value. Fresh thinking, innovative products, unrivaled domain and subject expertise, and smart, passionate people. This is how GEP creates and delivers unified business transformation solutions of unprecedented scale, power, and effectiveness. Named a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant and Best Provider at the World Procurement Awards and Epic Procurement Excellence Awards, GEP is frequently honored as an innovator and leader in source-to-pay procurement software by Gartner, Forrester, IDC, Procurement Leaders, Spend Matters, Paystream, and yours truly, Ardent Partners. GEP is also a ranked leader in managed procurement services, which is to say procurement outsourcing, by Everest Group, Nelson Hall, IDC, ISG, HFS, and IAOP. In addition, the primary research firm in the management consulting sector, ALM Intelligence, ranks GEP leader in procurement strategy and supply chain consulting. With 14 offices and operations centers in Europe, Asia, and the Americas, Clark, New Jersey-based GEP helps enterprises worldwide realize their strategic, operational, and financial objectives. To learn more about their comprehensive range of strategic and managed services, please visit www.gep.com. And for more about Smart by GEP, their cloud-native unified source-to-pay platform, please visit www.smartbygep.com. And with that, I'll pass it off to Andrew.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Hello and good day, everybody. Very pleased today to talk to you about what's happening in the world of procurement and specifically looking at some of the key findings and highlights from a research report published a little bit earlier this year called CPO Rising 2018, The Age of Intelligence. That report can be made is available through GEP. You can also come to us if for some reason you don't get it through that channel from our sponsor. Today's agenda, right? So Mudit and I are going to have a, sort of a back and forth dialogue and conversation that really focuses in on what's happening at the executive level within procurement, right? The state of the CPO. And we're going to look at sort of the operational aspects of procurement and before we then drill down into what's happening on the performance side, right? So we're going to share some operational and performance benchmarks, and then focus in on the top performers in the space. Going to conclude the presentation with some recommendations and strategies for success. And then we're going to leave some time at the end, ideally for questions that you can submit in the menu bar there. We'll commit if we don't get to answer all of the questions during the call, we will come back to you directly with answers. And with that, I'm going to just go forward and just dive in. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but this is, I guess, the 13th annual CPO-focused report that I've personally published. And just wanted to talk to you a little bit about our research process, right? So those of you that know Ardent Partners know that we've got a very rigorous approach to our market research studies that have been developed over, hundreds of independent research studies that have been developed over more than a decade of conducting this work. Our goal in the report and in today's presentation is to give people a sense of what's happening in the world of procurement today in a bigger picture view. As you can see here, we had more than 324 CPOs and other procurement executives respond. As part of the process, myself and Matt York interviewed 17 different CPOs or heads of procurement to understand what they were most focused on this year, and to add a little color and context to the report. I think it's also helpful, to understand that, the data is, represented by procurement practitioners, but also to understand, from a demographic standpoint, right, the data does tilt very heavily towards the senior levels, right, with almost 2/3 coming to us from the director level or higher, the vast majority working in procurement today. From a company size standpoint, right, so about 70% of the respondents are working at companies with annual revenues greater than $1 billion, and also about 70% are coming from North America, with good, solid representation from EMEA as well. So, with that said, want to look at, the study and really highlight, again, what's happening in the world of procurement in 2018, and as we look into 2019, what are procurement executives and leaders and teams focused on? And one of the sort of the thoughts and major themes, overarching themes of this year's study was, what is procurement need to be thinking about now that we're operating in what we call the age of intelligence, right? And I think that there have been major eras of the modern age, right? There's been the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and the digital revolution, and each of these have broken the continuum of human progress and really put it onto a higher trajectory. And it's been something more than simply recategorizing businesses, winners and losers. Those revolutions really did change the game, and while the digital revolution is far from over, it's only recently created a vast new opportunity from the literal explosion of new data that it has ignited. Right? I mean, in 2018 and as we head into 2019, businesses and consumers are now fully engulfed by technology and the data it both creates and captures. And this is absolutely true for procurement departments across the globe who continue to rise in both prominence and impact within their enterprises. In this new era, procurement teams now more than ever must continue to extend and enhance their capabilities in order to maintain their momentum and really begin to accelerate to the next level of performance, right? We really look at procurement as sitting on the cusp of this new age, right, this age of intelligence. And so, with that as context, let's look at what's happening in the world of the CPO. What is the state of the CPO today? And so, as we often do, right, we do try to capture some quotes and comments from, the different CPOs that we interview as part of this process. And, people first, right, having conducted extensive research over the past 13 years, it's really clear whether we're doing these research studies or speaking to CPOs at our events or just at, on inquiries, one of the CPO's major challenges, remains, a major opportunity, and that's finding, training, and retaining a team that can execute the CPO's broad vision and support the CPO's expanding purview, right? I mean, I think one of the big considerations today is that, what used to define procurement scope of operations has started to shift and morph and change. Now, CPOs, right, they have very different views on where to start, but the end point for best-in-class CPOs is in finding the optimal mix of talented staff and the right processes and systems to support them. And so, Mudit, first slide here, talking about people first. You've got great exposure to the GEP client base, and you work with many organizations over your years in industry. When you think about procurement and people, right? People are clearly important, but what kind of people? What are the talents that procurement needs today, in your view?
Yeah, Andrew, I couldn't agree more with the comment on the slide. The people-first agenda in terms of how we drive procurement to best-in-class. I think the challenge that the industry faces today and across the spectrum in terms of industry, size of the organizations, is what kind of changes are needed in the workforce and talent that works in procurement today. So examples include the new technologies, the emerging technologies, digitizations across the board, and ever-increasing and ever-powerful stakeholders and functions that are evolving fast in this new digital paradigm as well. So the key challenge for a lot of CPOs is how do we not just nurture the talent, but how do we make sure that the talent and the people working in procurement sees themselves as not just practitioners in business, but also practitioners in digital and technology space.
Right. No, I think that's right, and and I think that that's only going to continue to accelerate, right? I think that we have gone through the first revolution of supply management technology adoption, right? So I use the term supply management. I'm talking about really the source to pay or source to settle processes and the source to pay technologies. We've sort of gone through that first revolution. We've gotten a level of adoption, and organizations are, as we'll see, starting to rely more and more on technology to scale operations and scale best practices and to touch more spend. And so, I would absolutely agree with Mudit there that, not only do CPOs need to be thinking about what their requirements are, what the business needs today, but the direction of the business. And so, one of the interesting things, right? So having done, research as extensively as we have over the past, 12, 13 years, is that procurement really has changed in a pretty significant way over that period of time. It may not be so evident on a day-by-day, month-by-month basis, or even on a year-by-year basis, but I feel that this chart is a very interesting representation of the transformation we've seen over a larger scope. And I hearken back to when I first started to do this specific research study. So that's back in 2006. At the time, not every procurement organization had a strategic plan that it used to execute its operations each year. In fact, it was close to 40 or 50% of procurement organizations that were essentially just working on things, right, in no particular order and for no particular reason. You'd ask, well, why are you doing this? Well, the squeaky wheel got the attention. It wasn't necessarily aligned to the greatest value opportunities, and it clearly wasn't aligned to the strategic plan from the executives, right? What was the most important things to the enterprise? And so we fast forward to 2018, the vast majority of procurement organizations, almost every procurement organization is operating with at least a single-year plan and most likely a multi-year plan. But the challenge that we see here is that still almost 60% of all procurement organizations are working on plans that aren't tightly aligned with the most strategic needs of their organization. And that's problematic for all the obvious reasons. So rather than detail those out, it's the point I would make is, procurement has come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. And so when we start to look at, what are CPOs focused on, what are the pressures that they're responding to, I think that this chart is both a great reminder of the shift in focus that procurement has had over the past 6 or 7 years. And that is that, as procurement has gotten more traction within the enterprise, as procurement has taken on more responsibilities and has, greater awareness at the executive ranks and at the key stakeholder ranks within businesses, what it's been asked to do, has shifted from something that's purely focused on cost savings. We in fact have seen a steady and clear downward shift over the past 9 years, where at the sort of the height of the Great Recession, 9 out of 10 CPOs placed identifying cost savings as the top business pressure, and it was really that and almost nothing else. Today, you can see that savings is still important. It's still a key metric, but it is no longer the ultimate and most intense area that CPOs are executing against. It's really kind of interesting to see that there's a greater awareness that procurement needs to not only execute well, but be able to communicate and market those results out. And so the pressure is there, really to not only to execute, but to be able to market and show that what has been invested in procurement from a resources and financial standpoint is paying dividends. Now, Mudit, right, so your work brings you, sort of globally into contact with many different procurement groups. When you look at your clients and how they respond to pressures, I mean, maybe the better question is, are the groups responding to different pressures, and is that based on, different regions or industries? How do you see procurement groups responding to business pressures this year and going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. So maybe let's start with the industry cross-section. So what we see most often is that certain industries, especially, for example, CPG, retail, they are struggling with a lot of operating margin expansion pressures. So what we see in that cross-section is folks still trying to put a lot of emphasis and efforts on creating more cost savings for the organization. Now, that's not the only thing that they are doing. The organizations are asking for more, but in those specific industries, cost savings is still probably the number one goal due to just where they are with the market, with the operating margin pressures, and so on and so forth. If we look at a different type of industry sector, be it financial services, be it pharmaceutical, there I think the picture is slightly different, where the margins are healthier and the business is coming back to procurement saying, create more value for me beyond just cost savings. And procurement is getting engaged in areas like how do we get products to market faster? How do we reduce the product development lifecycle time? Because time to market can be a big factor in terms of operating profits and overall revenues in those industries. So we do see a cross-section of trends there. I think regionally speaking, typically in growth markets, which are driving a much higher percentage of revenues, you do see slightly less focus on cost savings by procurement. But in more mature markets like North America and Europe, there is a slightly bigger focus on driving cost savings there.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple of factors there. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, Andrew, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So great. So let's move forward here. Right. So what has been an interesting shift, and really linking back to Move's comment on the importance of developing and having staff that can leverage technology, at one level is sort of a generational issue, or one that was an issue when the technologies were first introduced in the late 90s. There's been that shift away from sort of the reticence of the average procurement staffer to utilize and not simply adopt and use technology, but begin to use it well. Those of you listening in today, right, would be wise to really sharpen those capabilities, because the CPO's top strategy for the last few years has really been one focused on technology. A couple of years ago, as CPOs were continuing to really try to place more spend under management in an aggressive fashion, collaboration, both inside with the business and then externally with suppliers, were among the top strategies to drive value and what the CPOs were most focused on. What we have seen in the last few years, and one of the shifts that we've seen more broadly in the industry is that, and for a couple of factors, and we'll get into those as we go forward, but that the CPOs, really, by and large, or at least by, sort of from a top strategy standpoint, have identified technology as one of the key drivers that are going to enable them to develop more agile processes and to leverage technology as a way to scale an organization's talent and expertise and best practices. So maybe more general question here. You look at this chart. What are some of your thoughts on the strategies and the technology usage here?
Yeah, no, Andrew, this chart makes complete sense. And what we are starting to see is certain best-in-class companies, they have moved away from technology enablement to a true digital transformation. So what they are essentially saying is that we are going to take technology adoption for granted, because that's a bare minimum. But we want to see is that how technology can play a central role in defining procurement strategy as we move forward. And in some ways, from a service provider standpoint, we also see a convergence between services and technology in the procurement space as well. So what we see in broader industry is a focus towards key outcomes and using technology as a central tenet to drive towards those outcomes. Like I said, I think we are across the spectrum of companies. You captured it very well, starting with 90s and how we are moving forward, how the technologies themselves have evolved. But we are starting to see that big paradigm shift where adoption is starting to lose its importance as a metric by itself. We are saying adoption is a given. Now let's make sure how technology actually is integrated in business strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, right, and again, right, part of this, I think, is the challenge on the people side. There's a couple elements to it. I think we'll hit upon that in a little bit, but we'll actually hit on it in 2 slides. But the challenge is, if you've got a flat head count, even a top performing organization that's driving increasing value, hard to get, to really expand the staff. You have to figure out, well, we're being given more responsibility year after year. What is it that's going to enable you to continue to scale your operations and continue to maintain the consistency from the level of quality and results as your remit grows, and technology, I think, becomes a pretty key part of that. And so, sort of ensuring that if technology is becoming more focal from a strategy standpoint, ensuring that you get full value out of it, optimal value out of it, becomes increasingly important. And so then, if we take sort of a forward look here and say, well, okay, what are the CPOs looking at over the next couple of years? And I guess anytime I'm either talking about or working on this annual CPO Rising report, I get pretty excited because, I personally see procurement's opportunities that still sit in front of it as just so massive. And I guess I really get a charge out of this chart because for the first time, and again, in a long time of doing this research, CPOs are focused on the opportunity that presents itself with using advanced analytics to find and aggregate and cleanse and extract and convert big data into intelligence, and then convert that intelligence into value. And in many ways, that's the larger theme of the report. It's how do we as a profession get smarter, right? We have seen CPOs present at our conference, some of the sort of leading edge ideas on what they're doing to identify value in the data that their systems are capturing. And it's pretty impressive stuff, right? I mean, we've seen this happen in other industries, right? And those of you that are sports fans are probably very aware of the analytics movement that has overtaken baseball and basketball and now football and even soccer. And this analytics is used to better understand something, right? And sometimes it's the strategies of how you play the games, or how do you better evaluate talent. Essentially, in sports, teams are taking an entirely different approach to the way they develop their strategies and really execute. And it's this new layer of intelligence that has made that change. And, it's seemingly come from thin air. And when I look at the procurement industry, right, and I don't think that this is hyperbole. I think that this is fact. We believe at Ardent Partners, and I strongly believe that procurement over the next couple of years, maybe not 2018, maybe not 2019, or even by 2020, but in the next 5 to 10 years, procurement is going to be able to do the same type of value extraction and creation that we're seeing in other industries. And Mudit, pull you back in here again to talk about advanced analytics and some of the opportunities you see with it.
Yeah, well, very well captured, Andrew. I think we see very similar trends on the ground where expectations from CPOs and how the companies are moving towards is what they're saying is that we have traditionally had a lot of disparate data insights, be it spend data, contract data, but they're all kind of pieces of data sitting by themselves. The ask today is how can we bring all of that together to provide meaningful and actionable insight. So what we see is that we have made tremendous progress with new tools and technologies, but there is still a lot of evolution that is going on, especially in advanced analytics, predictive analytics. I think those are the areas that are still evolving.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Right. So, I sort of gave a view to, some of the CPO's top hurdles in 2018, and the staff and talent one, certainly remains one, right at and near the top, sort of linked at some level to the budget constraints, right? So, procurement, even the top performing procurement organizations, don't necessarily get placed at the front of the line when it comes time to budget allocations. I would say that, it's why many organizations have that people first approach, right, and use that as a foundation. It's why many CPOs look at the technology and use that as a foundation. But as we sort of continue to move forward, right, if the mid-range CPO objectives, really look at, sort of aligned with the direction the industry should be heading in, it's clear to me when we look at, what are those game changers, when we ask the CPOs themselves, what are the things that are going to take your organization and put it onto a different trajectory? How do you change the procurement paradigm? As we sort of reference back the larger themes of the report and some of the largest opportunities that exist for procurement departments today, It really is, better data visibility and analytical capabilities. Right now, more than half of all CPOs see the path to the next level of performance is driven by finding value in the data. And I think that those of you listening in, should perk up in your seats, because, this is something that's starting to happen in a much faster way, and it's only going to continue to accelerate. So if you're not positioned today to take advantage of either new systems or new data science strategies, you need to start building the foundation today, right? I look at other industry innovations that we have seen, or other technology innovations that we have seen hit this market. The move to cloud, taken a decade, probably back of the envelope of this larger shift. You look at usability. I was interviewed in 2005 as to sort of the consumerization of e-procurement. Took about a decade to get to where we should be. The impact of some of these newer technologies, and specifically organizations' ability to leverage data, is going to happen much faster and over a much shorter time frame. And so organizations need to be ready and prepared to take advantage of those shifts, because the shift has already started. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the state of procurement, and in 2018, the state of procurement, and let me show you a little bit what I mean by that. Right, data first. If there's a takeaway today, this is it, right? There's gold in the systems. Now you've got to go and find it. Now this new CPO who we interviewed is starting with spend data, and that makes great sense, right? It is the bigger story captured in the report, and hopefully one of the main takeaways that you're getting from today's presentation. It's also what I've been talking about for the past couple of years, is that the big data opportunity for procurement, which starts with spend analytics, extends far beyond it. And so shift from the data to competitive sourcing, and sourcing has always been viewed as the most strategic aspect of a procurement operation, right? Opportunities to drive savings or find quality, leverage new strategies, or finding a well-sourced strategy, a well-sourced category. All these things can add a huge amount of uplift to an organization. But if sourcing remains as strategic as it ever has been, it's been de-emphasized to a degree by procurement organizations today, right? And so, when we look at, and so what I'm showing you here are, we ask, part of what we see, sort of the value of conducting this annual study, is to look at shifts that happen over larger periods of time. And so if you go back to 2009, where savings was vital to the survival of many organizations, CPOs pulled the sourcing lever. As you start to shift forward, sourcing more, it's no longer a quote-unquote key strategy. What we believe is that it's really been built into the fabric of an organization. If we were to go back, to when we first started, competitive sourcing was, a part of a procurement organization's strategy. When we've looked over the past couple of years, we see that almost 50% in 2018 of all addressable spend is sourced competitively. And sourcing remains a top strategy, but much in the same way that procurement organizations no longer prioritize PO processing, they just do it. I think the same holds true with competitive sourcing. Now, while the numbers are trending down a little bit, sourcing capabilities are certainly trending up. And so what I'm showing you in this chart is a comparison of the percentage of procurement organizations that possessed these different capabilities in 2018, as evidenced by the dark blue, as compared to 2014, as evidenced by the light blue. And you can see that in all of these areas, the capabilities have moved up, and moved up significantly, including the one I've highlighted at the top. And so, Muda, I'm going to pull you back in, and when you look at sourcing's evolution and team capabilities, what's important for what do you think is important for organizations to focus on?
Yeah, so Andrew, I think this is a great picture. Probably a great view that also shows the cross-section of procurement technology capabilities that have grown and matured in the past, both from process and technology side. So I think what the industry is going towards is an end-to-end view of all of these capabilities, so they can not only look at just the spend data or the contract data, but they want to draw insights that has end-to-end visibility across their supply base, across these various tenets of procurement. So that is a trend that we see most often. It's the end-to-end visibility that has become much more of a focal point to drive more opportunities and hence more value.
Great. So we've been talking about technology, and so where are we today from an adoption standpoint? This chart shows the percentage of enterprises in the market today that have adopted these technologies. We sort of look holistically at procurement organizations. I mean, sort of the main takeaway today is that a fully automated, well-linked, holistic view of the source-to-settle process. That is, it remains, not necessarily the exception, but it's certainly not the rule within procurement. But as we've seen, from where CPOs are focused and the direction that this is heading, these numbers do continue to track up each year, slowly but surely. One of the things that's going to drive adoption, and again, this is adoption at the enterprise level. What's important to continue to drive these numbers forward is that the proficiency of procurement organizations in using technology and getting value out of their investments in technology has been an area that the average procurement department has struggled with in recent times. And now that, however, is starting to shift, right? So just a few years ago, procurement generally viewed its technology proficiency as, somewhere between poor and adequate. And what we're seeing is, as CPOs have emphasized technology to a greater degree, right? Top strategy in 2018 is to get more value out of technology and to use it more part and parcel with operations. It's not a surprise then that the proficiencies are also going to rise, right? If your CPO says these are the things that are important to our organization, the staff should be following in line. Sort of other elements that are causing these numbers to increase are that the solutions over the past couple of years really have become much more intuitive. They have become much more usable, and as organizations start to think about utilizing suites of technology versus distinct applications, the knowledge and learnings of using the technology, sort of scales across the full source-to-settle process. Now, we asked the question, how important is it to adopt the latest technology? And clearly, innovation, pervades society, and innovation pervades business, and very clearly, innovation pervades the supply management technology marketplace. I would say that probably more than any other aspect, technology innovation is going to have an impact on procurement. And I think 51% actually, share my view, right? They believe it's critical, or at least very important, to be on the cutting edge, while another quarter know that it's important to adopt the latest technologies. And clearly, there may be budget constraints, there may be skill and talent constraints, there may be, other organizational constraints. The recommendation here, though, is to try to bypass and overcome those hurdles. And while you're doing so, begin to track and understand what's happening in the marketplace. Because as we move to this next slide, there's a lot of new technologies, right? So, we've sort of settled in and probably should have had Matt York present on this slide because he's, Ardent's futurist and spends a lot of time talking about innovation and, what we are calling the Industry 4.0 technologies. And, we cover each of these technology areas, and we believe that your teams should have each of these on their radar. And so rather than me give you a detailed, view on what all of these are. What I think I want to do is, let's start with Mudit here and maybe highlight, some of the main ideas or technologies that you think should be in focus.
Yeah. Andrew, that's a great setup. I mean, all of these key technologies are pretty critical. I think one thing that we definitely want our audience to take away is that the innovation, the pace of the innovation that's happening, these technologies are much more closer to us than any other time. So we're not talking about, a 3-year horizon. We are more talking about 12 to 18-month horizon for a lot of these technologies to truly drive value in procurement. Some of them are already driving value in procurement, others still emerging and still getting integrated. I think what we see most often is that the actual integration of these technologies is still aspirational for many companies. So the real challenge is not to just have individual capabilities, but to have an ecosystem that can drive the right outcomes and the work gets completed in harmony. The other key trend that we see is that the boundaries of these technologies are getting challenged. So, a good example is RPAs, which started out as largely an efficiency and productivity play. But now what we see is that the innovation that is happening is that combining the RPAs with AI to drive higher cognitive value and address more effectiveness and more opportunities versus just the efficiency plays. So we see the use cases evolving. We see the integration between these technologies evolving. So this is a very interesting space. It's something that we all should keep on our radars as procurement practitioners.
Yep. No, that's great. That's great. And so another thing that people should have an understanding of and an awareness of is the performance that's occurring in the marketplace, right? So certainly being able to track and understand your own metrics, but to also understand what's happening more broadly in the market and what leaders are doing, right? So we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about procurement metrics and from both a performance and operational standpoint. I say it dozens of times each year, but visibility into spend is the foundation upon which a best-in-class procurement organization is built. I think that's full stop, and clearly shared by this VP who essentially serves as a CPO of a pretty large global organization. I mentioned procurement benchmarks. In each of these annual studies, Ardent captures, metrics like these and others. Rather than go line by line on each of these, I would say that, spend under management, still continues to float in the 60% range. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. Savings numbers have been trending down somewhat, in part because of where we are in the business cycle and where we are in part because of what CPOs are most focused on. I would say that in general, the metrics are okay, but the compliance rates tend to underperform where we think they should be in the market. And for those organizations that don't have large budgets, that don't have large amount of resources to tap into, there's a lot of value in just going through and auditing your contract compliance rates, and to assure that the work that you've done on the sourcing side is actually going to be realized, on the execution side. And so these are the 2018 procurement benchmarks. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and going to spend the next year really looking at this in more depth, is that when I started working in the industry about 20 years ago, you spent a lot of time talking about the importance of spend under management and getting visibility into total enterprise spend. You help organizations sort of understand the concept. Now I think it's broadly understood, spend under management, what it is, and the value of that number and tracking it. The number has been flat for the past few years, and in 2018, less than 1 in 5, right? So only 15% of CPOs have prioritized increasing it over the next 2 to 3 years. And so, but they don't necessarily want to, get too far into depth as to, is procurement starting to shift and change, and should we be rethinking, what is a best-in-class procurement organization? But I do want to just sort of put that idea out there, right? We still believe that, organizations that place more spend under management, as I'll show you in the next few slides, they do a lot of other things very well. And Mudit, I know that, your clients have views on spend under management, and you have those as well. So maybe you can share those.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely, Andrew. I think from what we see in the industry, spend under management is probably the next most important metric after the actual quantitative savings. In fact, a lot of industry leaders are using this metric almost as a leading indicator for what their savings might be, because that defines the spectrum of what they can potentially go after. So very critical, very important. Completely agree with the research findings here. In fact, I think it is very notable that the difference between the industry average and best in class is almost 30 percentage points. So 60% to 90% is a pretty big jump. And
right.
Something that we also often see as part of the industry there. So yeah, so we are on that slide now. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah. No, I wanted to show that, right? So I mean, sort of what you've called out here, right? So between the best in class and the all other, right? So in our research, real quick, right? That we will segment based upon performance the top 20%, and we call that group the best in class. And then we look at the best in class and understand how they're performing in different areas, as you can see here in the column, and then compare them to the other 80%. The all others group, and Mudit's exactly right. The delta between these groups is significant, and you start to look at the other areas as well, and not surprisingly, to Mudit's point and what his clients are doing is when you've got visibility into spend, when you're managing it, you're able to influence it, you're able to add value to it. And that's the opportunity that has existed. And again, we're going to come back and look at this a little bit more closely as, trying to, sort of, look at the procurement performance paradigm and not necessarily redefine best-in-class procurement, but to look at it a little bit more closely in next year's study. But let's look at a couple of the drivers, very quickly of what best-in-class procurement organizations are doing differently or better or more significantly. And, not surprisingly, when it comes to alignment with business, it's like when you have all of your ducks in a row, you have all of your ducks in a row. And so you're managing spend, you've got the alignment with the executives, and you are creating more value, and this chart shows, by a significant degree, the best in class have significantly more alignment with the directions of their organizations. It's important for operations and performance in the current year. It's important for operations and performance as you move forward, right? Because organizations are shifting business strategies. The level of innovation and competition are requiring enterprises to be much more agile. Procurement has to follow the lead of what's happening at the top of the organization. Big picture story here. Not surprisingly, when the best-in-class managing more than 90% of spend, they have better visibility. And visibility is the enabler to understand where the largest opportunities are. How do you allocate your resources? Again, I said at the beginning of this section, visibility into spend and into operations, right? I mean, that's the foundation upon which the procurement organization should be built. And clearly here, it's one of the key differentiators for best-in-class organizations. Now, the question is, what enables that visibility? And, as we see here, the best-in-class, leverage technology to a greater degree. So what we'll show on this slide is the level of adoption within each of the maturity classes. for each of the different applications. And the best-in-class, as represented by the blue, have adopted technology solutions on a range of between 20 and I think 40-odd% more likely to have those solutions in place. But it's not simply just having the technology in place. It's that they're able to activate it and leverage it to a greater degree because their proficiency rates are higher and their focus on driving more value out of it is also higher. And so, let's look here to, what's one slide that sort of gives you a view into, what does a best-in-class procurement operation look like? They've shown that, these enterprises have shown that investments in improving internal systems and processes and enhancing external relationships with key partners are proven paths to better performance. Right? The best-in-class have differentiated themselves with superior performance across the primary procurement metrics, shown a few slides ago, and they've got these characteristics shown here, to a greater degree and impact to gain their advantage. Right? Stronger leadership. Right? I mean, one of the key defining traits of a best-in-class procurement organization is a strong CPO. We've shown that they've got better executive alignment. They're managing more spend, so they've got better and engaged shareholders. Technology, visibility to a greater degree. They manage their people, more successfully and more more deliberately, I guess I would say. And they think about what they're doing in a more holistic manner. And so, Muda, to bring it back in again, what do you think are some of the important takeaways when you think about best-in-class and procurement performance?
Yeah, so Andrew, I think all the 4 pillars jive very well with what we see in the cross-section of GEP client base. What I would say is that technology is almost at the center of a lot of these things. It's the interconnection between these 4 pillars that make these best-in-class companies even more potent at what they do. So their business processes would be tightly integrated into technology. The training and support includes the technology agenda and insights and analytics agenda so that the workforce is able to drive the right kind of outcomes. And the leadership is more and more engaged across the process, technology, and people areas, which we didn't see as often before. A lot of times what we had seen in the past is CPOs delegating these key details of technologies and interconnected processes to some kind of PMO roles, be it in procurement or be it in IT. Now we see the leadership taking more of a charge in driving some of these outcomes because they understand and they know the importance of these 4 pillars. So those are some of the trends that we see out there and how we see some mature companies utilizing these 4 pillars.
Yeah, great commentary. So let's look. I think we've got a question or two coming in, and we'll get to those. Wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the recommendations or strategies for success. And one of the things as you start to think about, right, so larger theme of the report, right, is what is an intelligent procurement operation, and how do you start to think about it? I would say that as I just sort of have laid out here, right, it's not necessarily a single thing, right? So yes, advanced analytics and the big data opportunity, but intelligence is going to mean, procurement intelligence is going to mean different things to different organizations based on industry, based on region, and based on maturity. And what you really need to do is take, as Muda was just saying, a much more holistic approach and view to the interconnection of those 4 pillars so that you ensure that the sum is greater than the whole of its parts. And, so let's look at a few strategies for success, right? And so, I think that, maybe, more than anything, it's a focus on developing, a proactive and agile organization, right? The drivers of that agility are going to be visibility, engagement, and technology. But we have been talking about Procurement Agility, for 5 or 6 years now, and we really do see that as one of the defining characteristics of leading procurement organizations as we move forward. I think that as you look at innovation and how it's defined and how it's defined within the organization and how it's defined across the supply chain, the goal is for procurement to take a lead role in that. We've clearly talked about sort of a shifting landscape in the talent and skills that are going to be needed to drive value for procurement organizations moving forward, right? Made the point early on that, having people who can utilize the technology that's in place, is going to be a huge value driver going forward. We believe, much in the same way that there used to be the challenge that CPOs and CFOs had working together, and we used to make the recommendation of hiring some financial skills within the procurement team so that they could better engage and liaise with finance. If you believe that there is this big data opportunity, the time is now to begin to find those capabilities in the marketplace, find those capabilities within the enterprise, and to develop those capabilities within the enterprise. Obviously, we've spent a fair amount of talking about technology. Adopting these solutions, it's not just the silver bullet, right? You need to back it with the right process. You need to have the right processes, mapped into those solutions. You need to make sure that the technology, is adopted, but really, to Mudit's point, moving beyond adoption, right? It needs to just be sort of, business as usual. The focus then, if you make the technology usage business as usual, you're then able to focus on how do you become much more proficient and how do you move the numbers that we've seen in the market, which have been tracking up, continue to do so. And then maybe the last recommendation, would be that, there's lots of innovation in the marketplace. There's lots of new technologies that are already working within your enterprise. Collaborate with IT to track and really understand what's happening and where those largest leverage points are. Now, I know that I've seen a question or two come in, and so I'm going to turn it back over to Matt. Matt, maybe we've got time for one question here.
Yes, we sure do. So, audience member asks, what are some of the most mature intelligent technologies that sourcing and procurement practitioners are using now?
So, Mudit, you want to go first, or you want me?
Yeah, no, I can take that. So, Matt, I think there are a few technologies that have made a lot of progress. I think we talked about robotic process automation. We see that live and working across our client base. I think the unified cloud solutions, the platforms that can bring a lot of those individual modules together and drive end-to-end insight is something that's already available, and we see a lot of clients adopting those technologies. And thirdly, I would say that the artificial intelligence pieces, the chatbots, the natural language processing, it's coming up, but not quite. And then I think the farthest behind is probably the blockchain technology, which I think a lot of providers and clients are keeping a close eye towards. They are tracking the progress, but the ecosystem hasn't evolved for everybody to jump on it, to jump on a common ledger system. In my mind, those were some of the front runners and probably the laggard in terms of blockchain. But Andrew, do you see something different from your research?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily different. What I would say is that, the big, where we are in 2018 is still, just on the cusp of something that I think is going to be very exciting. The big wins today are being able to link spend analysis and what has happened in the near past to what decision-making is happening in the immediate present on the sourcing side. We have had some presenters at our annual conference talk about things that they're doing from a data science and analytical standpoint, both on the bid analysis side and on the operational side, that are presenting extraordinary leverage, right? Getting that additional 10, 15, sometimes 20% of value out of the same process. And it's that kind of technology which does exist today, but it's not widely used yet. That really is very exciting. And so, for those listening in today, I would sort of conclude with the idea that you need to have the foundation in place for you to begin to even start to think about taking on these newer technologies and these newer opportunities. I think it's a very exciting time. I think we are in the age of intelligence. I think that it's we're becoming more and more data driven, and that we need to have the capabilities, we need to have the tools, we need to have the processes, we need to have the engagement and alignment, and we need to have the CPO leadership all in place. That sounds like a tall order, but we're seeing organizations that have this stuff in place today, and the results that they're delivering are, it's very exciting. And so there you go.
Great. Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Luna, for your answers and perspective. We did have a couple more questions come in. Unfortunately, we are out of time, in fact, a little bit over. So we should end it here. Wanted to thank our guests and our sponsors for their time and sponsorship today. And, we'll see everyone next time. Take care, people.